welcome to Altacast number 2. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going now.
Oh,
It's
welcome.
Altacast 2 is just going to be...
yeah, we gotta go. Victor's gonna come
Yeah.
back. It's gonna be. I'm leaving.
Today is just me and Victor for the first starting bit. And then we're going to have Joel come in for the Q&A section afterwards. Yep. Welcome to Altacast 2. Introducing our guest for today, Victor Nascimento.
Hey.
So, quick heads up, in terms of the Altacast, we're going to start doing it every 2 weeks. We're going to try and release one whenever the cosmetics roll out. And we're going to try and keep a steady format throughout the show. So it's going to start with this, which is like the intro. Then we're going to quickly go over what the team's doing. It'll usually be the same thing that we're doing last time. We'll talk a bit about what the guest is working on, which today is Victor. And then we're going to sort of expand from that into what that means for the future of the game. So today we're going to be talking about crafting and professions. And then we're going to close things off with the question and answer segment from the forum thing, where we ask questions and you guys put in and vote for questions. And I'll be doing that with Joel at the end of every episode. So yeah, welcome, Victor.
Hey there. Thank you for having me, Boramy, in this beautiful space we have here,
Yeah.
right on the corner.
We're starting to get more formal with these things.
Next time we should be like
Yeah.
pretty formal, have a like shirt, bottom up shirt, nice.
Yeah, we're gonna. And I need like my talk show host desk as well.
Gonna have the cars.
And I need
So-
I need somebody sitting behind you that just doesn't do anything, like Andy Richter or something from
But
Conan.
we also need like the fake laugh. Ha, 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 ha,
Yeah, the
ha.
audience.
Every time we do a bad joke, which is most
Are
of
we
them.
getting a band?
Oh, yeah, we
We're
should get
getting a band.
Yeah,
That would be great.
big budget going into this. All right,
Actually, it's not a big budget because just Joe and Serena can play, so like they just play in the background.
I'm gonna try and learn the instrument. I think I'm gonna start learning
Good
an
for you
instrument.
because I'm not. I can play rock band. Does it count?
Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
so I'm gonna leave that one in the air where I can actually shut down. So
Okay, so Victor and I have been working on generic crafting stuff.
fancy name.
Yep, you may have heard about it from the last podcast, where we talk a bit about bags, the kind of hopes we've got into it. At the time of the last Altacast, we hadn't started on it, but now we have. And it's going pretty well.
Yes.
What do you
it's-
reckon, Vic?
It is moving quite smoothly. We are really aiming to get it done and out for you guys very soon. We definitely expanded like way beyond just bags. So in the beginning it was mostly bag crafting, but now we're expanding to generic crafting, which means is in a sense everything that we didn't know how to craft before. Because you do have handles like wooden pieces, you have metal pieces. So how can we build something that is in between, like a bucket or some other random items that we might show up soon?
Yeah,
Stay tuned.
one of the key problems with the existing crafting system is that essentially, like, you had a lid, like if this is something you crafted, we just dropped a lid in the game, right? And then you had the pen, and then you just literally combine them together. But that meant that we had, for every item that has this unique sort of piece to it, we had to have an item equivalent. This new crafting system, that's not the case anymore. We sort of have this final output that we know what it looks like, and that's how we made it, like the lantern. And then we have these, and we call it the generic crafting system because you use these generic bits and pieces, and you add it to this framework, and then it starts to construct the lantern that we've already made. And that means that we have less useless junk items, essentially, ideally. I mean, like we won't need to have like junk, like, 1 bar of a lantern specifically.
Yes.
That's not going to be a thing.
But you can still keep your bones around.
Yeah, we'll still have your bones for now.
You know who we're talking to.
Just to go around quickly, in terms of what everyone's doing, they're still doing the same stuff they were. Joel's still on forests. You can check out supporter spoilers. He's been posting some new screenshots of what he's doing there. Primarily trying to get some more horizontal variety with landscapes. Previously he had a lot of height stuff going on. Now we're trying to get some things that just span across the entire forest. It's looking pretty cool. Serena's working on cosmetics still. Sort of, Christmas is coming, obviously, and like couple of weeks, well, like December essentially. Once December comes in, so that's when
6 weeks away, but like, yeah, right.
yeah, we have to
There's
start
already
early for
Christmas
us.
out there, so
And we've got a lot of, work and business things planned around that time, so it's going to be a busy time for us. Victor and I are working on the crafting things, and Timo's currently doing some more server things. Primarily just, sort of watching how the private servers are going. And the private servers are really blowing up. I think there's like 120 servers right now.
I don't know. It's funny because normally when we are doing our internal tasks, we need to launch up or connect to live servers or at the very least servers we have names for, because it's easy, right? It's way easier to say, oh, let me connect to Timo's server instead of connecting to server 234. But guess what? Nowadays it's very hard because you say, oh, let me grab the online servers. There's like 120 possible servers, so I need to like go through and scroll through, and we see everyone. So it's really fun. It's really good to see you guys are using it, and hope you guys are enjoying it as well, having the freedom. We from time to time we see some pictures, some screenshots, or some videos of very interesting buildings you guys are making out there, or scene building houses. It's it's quite fun how creativity plays a role in all the things we never imagined you guys would use them for.
Like there's a lot of stuff that they've been using that I didn't realize they could spawn.
Yes, I mean either. Like, so it's from time to time we get like, oh my god, they're spawning this thing they shouldn't, and they are throwing errors all left and right. Those things do happen, but then at the same time, people go and get very creative, which is very fun.
Back on the crafting stuff that we're doing, there's a key difference that we're trying to achieve with this new crafting system, and that's we're hoping to implement a bit more of a slightly harsher failure concept. Right now, when you're doing something like forging, you are just bashing the blade over the anvil. There's no real nuance or precision in that. Nothing can really go wrong, other than it can take you longer than it could.
And we do have time, right?
Yeah, and we've got plenty of time to forge those Valiant swords and stuff like that. So with the generic crafting, there is a chance that if you do things incorrectly, things can fail and you can lose some material. That's something that we want to propagate a bit more, like this idea of being able to fail a bit harsher in other things.
Yeah, because right now the game, in a sense, is very safe, right? Provided that you have a very strong hammer or a very strong chisel or what's or not, you can just go in and bash as hard as you can, quite mindlessly, and things will get done. So it kind of allows you to just mindless do stuff, but then it takes a bit away of, oh, I am a better blacksmith than my friend. That doesn't mean much when I am at max level. So you really want to bring back a bit more of, hey, I am a better blacksmith means I can maybe use less resources, or I have like 100% ratio of blades, so I always succeed, which would be a good thing.
So that's gonna be an interesting first experiment with this new crafting system to see how well people can get the use of it. How well can, like, I don't know, like I'm slightly scared of people losing their materials, but it's I think it'll be for the best. They're not gonna be
that expensive, guys.
Yeah, so we're making acquisition of these materials fairly easy to begin with.
Yeah.
And obviously there are some rarer ones you can collect.
Like I think it's important, right? Because right now we also, at the very least, the idea is that you can make multiple beads from a single piece, as far as I get. So if I'm making something out of Valiant, right? I still means I'm gonna get a lot out of my single ingot, but it's gonna be a bit harder to make. So it's like I should be practicing as I move along instead of just jumping from, oh, I have my copper lantern and then I'm gonna make an Avenon one. If you simply do that jump straight away, you might start failing that much, and you will pretty much start losing that material. So we want you to actually practice along the different materials so you can get better at them.
Yeah. And there's some extra nuance now that comes with materials, because to explain the system pretty briefly, you find pages in the game world, and those are essentially like the recipes, like you would for for chiseling. And once you place them on this station, you're able to see a ghost version of it, and then you can start to apply materials on it. In order to lock down a material, you have to nail down these ethereal nails that appear. And the nailing process is where a lot of that nuance comes in, where, obviously if you hit it at a completely wrong angle, it'll sort of bend out of shape, and then you risk damaging the material that you just placed if you were to continue nailing and hammering like that. On top of that, hammering too hard also now can have a negative impact on the process, which means that you really have to find the precision that you need. And that means that for the first time ever, it's not necessarily the best idea for you to use a Valiant hammer to craft something.
Yes. So you should be finding the right tools for the right job instead of having a single do-it-all tool that you use for everything.
And there are other reasons why you would want to. So obviously, that doesn't completely rule out the reason why your reason for having a strong hammer, because you have a bit of a time limit on how quickly you need to nail these things down. If you're not fast enough, the material will pop back out, and then you'll have to restart your process over. And that means that you do sort of find that balance between having a hammer that you can really go complete your stuff with, but it's not too strong that you're gonna overshoot and then damage your materials.
Exactly. And obviously, as everything else, the different hammers, they provide different values. So some of them are very easy to hit, some of them are a bit harder to hit. So maybe you actually get a compromise and get a very high quality one that is a bit harder to hit. So in average, you are doing pretty much the right amount of damage in a way that you feel comfortable doing. So that also plays a role.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more or less.
That's pretty much
it.
Crafting.
Yep. There's a bit more to it with the assembly stuff.
Yes.
So, previously when you're this is back to my pen and lid analogy. I have to be holding these two pieces in order to craft them. And that was a really nice intuitive way for you to be able to craft things because you're holding them. But now we're sort of trying to think of a way that's more flexible for how to create things, and this requirement of having to be able to hold things in each hand kind of doesn't make sense if you're trying to create larger things. So for example, imagine if you had to combine a pot and a box together, right? You can't really control each one if you're holding them with one hand. So now we're introducing what we're calling the assembly deck, which is this station where you can place certain items that can actually utilize this, and it sort of mounts them in a fixed position where you can then apply stuff to it. And that means that now you can have, it can feel like you're creating something a bit larger, and obviously it creates this new limit of having to be at that location to be able to craft things. You can't just take the components and merge them somewhere out in the field. Now you have to be in this particular station.
Exactly. And not only it's big items, but it's mostly things that change functionality of items, right? So spoil.
Yeah, you can spoil what we've got so far.
So far, at the very least, we want to have modifiers for the bags, right? So bags, we all know, a bulk thing, 9 docks, all good. But what happens when you want more docks? What happens when you want quick access to something? We want to allow you to do, at the very least, 2 side docks, crafting points, assembly points, which you can put maybe 2 extra docks, or you can make quick access slots. So when you have a bag on your back, you can just quickly remove your tool or your weapon, or maybe just have some extra docks. So you remove and you could have up to 13 docks. So
yeah. And we're gonna be so this is sort of part of the content part of the crafting experience. Right now we've been primarily working on the system, and we're just starting to get over to the point where we can start to work on these content features. So we'd like to experiment with some of the long requested features, like being able to have a quiver and a bow on your back, for example, and being able to access those quickly, as well as having your bag there, so that you can have access to your larger tools and things like that, and really expanding what your backpack needs.
Exactly. So that's a bit of what we're trying to do. I'm also currently rewriting how our bag works, because I know everybody loses their bags. I'm like, oh, you spin the bag and then you go rocketing away, or you die and it blows to oblivion. those things do happen a lot, unfortunately, because we kind of did a somewhat naive decision right when we started the game to make use of our Unity physics, and it behaves, right? It behaves, and now we're trying to move a bit away and do it a bit more, put a bit more thought into how we move, how it moves around, and it should be safer. So, getting places.
Yeah, the bag rewrite's been a long time coming. We've talked about it a lot at the office, but it's always been a bit of a thing.
No one wanted to do it. So it's not like I want to, but I realize we need to. Right?
Yeah. Because now that we're making you more attached to your bag in a sense, we want to try and help you preserve it.
Especially because not only you change the functionality with all the system, you also change the colors of it. So at the very beginning, I think we'll only do it visually, but over time we intend to make all these materials you put into your items they make a difference, right? It could be a bit more durable, it could be a bit heavier. We're gonna play along with those over time. But
yeah, so something that's important for us when we're creating these mechanics, especially ones that have, a lot of nuance to the creation process, we want it to have as meaningful an output as possible. So with bag crafting, we're going to look at all these parameters that we can add, like weight, like durability, and things like that, to make so that your choice of materials actually makes a difference. What else we got? We've got a list of topics that we're supposed to talk about.
This is not rehearsed. This is not that prepared. We just got sit here. Like, I'm working, but hey, did you come and do this? I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, behind this thing, everybody's working on super secret stuff. Right behind it, there's super secret things.
Yes, actually there is.
Yeah.
See, it's the secret stuff trying to get out.
So I think that pretty much wraps up what we're currently doing at the office so far. This will mean that there's a new place in the overworld, a new little building for you guys to hang out in and do this crafting stuff and learn all about it. So a couple more little goals for the starting players.
Yeah.
But now we're gonna move over to the future talk segment. Thankfully, we touched on this a little bit with the evolution of the professions, how we want them to have more failure concepts. But all of this crafting talk kind of brings up the question of armor crafting.
Yes.
And where is that on the roadmap? We talked about it an entire year ago. We were teasing it a little bit prematurely. But over the last bit, we've been analyzing the current state of the game and where most of the gameplay focus kind of is. Balance-wise, we really feel like you guys are very powerful.
Whenever we hear those stories of, the guy jumped on me and two-shot me right away, I'm like, yeah, I would say it's a bit too powerful. Or when we watch streams, we release the Turabatas in less than an hour, you would have players rushing through the caves and murdering them left and right as if they were paperweights. So, yeah, I would say you guys are a bit powerful, right?
So, a bit of what we wanted to achieve is improve the challenges in the game before we start to add more ways for you to buff yourself. So that's kind of the direction that we want to take, the adventure aspect of the game, as opposed to the crafting side, is to really push in on those kind of hazards you might encounter in the environment. See if we can create more enemies. Bosses have been talked about for a long time. And really get you to...
So environmental damages as well. So hazards, you would have more poison clouds, more kind of mines, right? Like mines, a lot of quotation marks in those. So traversal things, in the sense when you go to the woodcutting area with the goteras, you have water, and that completely changes how you move through the zone, and you need to be jumping from lily pad to lily pad. So all those things are things that challenge you, not only how hard can you hit something, but also how you look the world.
Yeah, because there's for example, if you're traversing through the overworld generally, you can quite easily run through anything that you encounter. Like we have worms pop up in the maze, in the mountain pass behind the town hall. And generally, if you're trying to get to the other end, you can just sort of run through. One of the reasons I think people enjoy the danger of the caves a bit is because there's this darkness sort of surrounding you, and that's essentially like the biggest obstacle you're encountering there is not knowing your way. So you're sort of backpedaling and tracking and trying to keep an idea of where you are. That's not really present in the overworld. There's nothing that challenges you in that same way, and so we'd like to eventually explore that direction for things that are lit. We did a bit of that. You know, we really enjoy the effects that the phantoms give you when you've got the curse, and just seeing the fog roll in and stuff like that. And
yeah, that part was really fun when we started playing with those, and suddenly we managed to get something that really feels a bit lost, right? When we would start playing it on a kind of like closed box thing. And even then, it was like, oh my god, I do not know exactly where I am. And suddenly, a wall would appear. So it was really fun.
Yeah, so there's a whole set of things we want to do with that, pretty much. There's no timeline on that production-wise. It's more so just what we're talking about.
Yes.
So that's kind of the next direction we want to take the game. Probably, you know, I like to think we're going to be doing that in 2020. But it's undecided as of yet when that's going to happen, because there's already a bunch of things already planned. Obviously, the forest that Joel's working on are going to play a bit of a role in that, and that is an aspect of the game that we want to supplement with this traversal hazard that we're talking about, where, you know, the forest shouldn't feel like the labyrinth where you can just sort of blaze straight through. It should feel like this thing that you have to kind of, you know, progress through, almost like inch by inch, you know, navigating and making your way, or at least in some of the more dangerous areas.
Yes, because otherwise you just blaze through once, mark the way, and it's done, right?
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to make it so that it is always a track. You always need to progress through it instead of just skip it, in a sense.
Yeah, some of the ideas that we've had regarding that are things like a poison bog sort of thing, or poison clouds, or plants that can react to your movement. We thought about more mechanical things, like you needing to use the environment to traverse this path. Like if there's this deep bog that you can't walk through, but you can, you know, use this platform contraption and wind it to sort of move you across, and then suddenly the enemies and stuff like that. It's almost like we're putting you at a fixed speed throughout this place, and then the enemies can have their way, and you have to, you're restricted in how you can deal with it during that time.
Yes. So those are interesting.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your ideas more about this. You know, these sort of challenges that we can create as you travel. Obviously, just recently we released the climbing stuff, which I know people really enjoyed.
Everyone is posting a lot of pictures. There are tons of feedback. We are reading them. We might not necessarily act on them right now, because we still feel we still do not have a place for climbing into the main game.
Yeah. Because
you would go and you would climb the major tower, right? The town hall in the town, and that's it, right? So it doesn't have a place yet. It will. We do have some ideas we want to implement there, but as soon as we have like some free people, right? Because everyone is really busy. We will reassess climbing.
So pretty much, I think the deal with climbing in production is that we're, so we have this very early first version out, and I think that work is going to be done on it, like very slowly. Like we're not even scheduling any work to be planned on it, but the goal with it is that every update we do is going to sort of move it towards the direction where we can release it for the main game. So that means that working on a bit of the limiters and the parameters that will make it a meaningful experience in the main game, and something that's a bit more balanced as well. So just to explain how climbing works real quick.
Grab the big one. Grab one that makes it look smart. C#.
Okay, so we have these right now in the level we have these handholds, and pretty much how you grab them, whether your hand is over or under or to the side like that, or across this way, is how it affects your grip strength, which is how much you can move. How close you are to the hold will determine how well you can move as well. So there's all sorts of these handholds complexities, but they're really designed for this sort of square and corner shape. Something that you might see in the there are these, like, we tried experimenting with these cylinders, and they're really tough to grab.
Yes.
Sometimes, like, it feels like you're grabbing at it, but then your hand sort of goes around it and stuff like that. And that's partially because the system wasn't designed for cylinders. That was us kind of stretching out what the system could theoretically do. So that aspect of, like, how your hands can grab the world is going to change, and I think that's going to be one of the key components of making it more viable for the overworld, where there are all of these different shapes, and it's more of like this kind of grip. Like, what does that mean for me to be able to hold something?
How strong that is, because right now you kind of don't have that very defined.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's the role of tools, obviously, with climbing. So we have some ideas on how I think everything's going to combine together to work into a climbing system that's not broken and will feel like you're always grabbing onto things when you're trying to do things. It's still a bit early for us to go more in depth about that, but that's kind of the direction we want to take the climbing stuff. And for the most part, the climbing branch is here to stay. It's kind of like our placeholder level for between other supported features that we want to sort of give previews of. I know that we've always wanted to do a forest preview, and we will once it's more ready and has a bit more goals. I don't know, Joel, how do you reckon it'll go?
Yeah, once we've actually got stuff to do in there, maybe.
Yeah, because right now Joe is working a lot on generating the thing, so getting paths across, making sure that everything makes sense, painting the terrain, like making the heights and all those things. So it's still very static, and we have definitely not run some performance into it. It generates, it's generating better and better each day, but we are still not looking at how quick it generates. So it would not be great to be in VR, roaming through the fields and say it's stuck in and get like, I don't know, what, 2 FPS?
Getting super stuttered.
I think 2 FPS is not good for anyone.
So like, to give you an idea, most of us on the team haven't really had a walk through the forest. Right now we're sort of letting Joel work on it as much as he wants until he's ready for us. And then eventually we'll start to look at adding content and fun things for you to discover.
But it's looking really good.
It is looking pretty good, yeah. I look forward to having, like, me or Serena starting to work on it and help create these new assets that are going to be nice landmarks and things like that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think that more or less covers key content for the Altacast in terms of the current work that we're doing and a bit of the meaning that it has for the future of the game. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As I mentioned, we are planning to do it every 2 weeks. And now we're going to move over to the Q&A section. Victor, thanks a lot for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Hope you guys
it's a pleasure.
This. Not that many spoilers, but at least you guys know exactly where we are. Now I need to go back and actually do the stuff I talked about. So, see you all.
We'll be back right after the ads.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh. And we're back. Hello, folks. All right, so thanks everyone for sending your questions. We've got them on the screen over here. We're going to look through the top of them. Some of these, like how many?
We're not going to answer all of them. We'll keep going till we get bored, and we're not necessarily going to answer them in order either. But I think two of the top few are related to PvP. And the main two concerns there are, I guess, how easy it is to kill people. This one specifically mentions the strength potion, which I believe is actually being nerfed.
Yeah, so one of the questions is the concerns about the strength potions with salt and how they're easily able to kill players using that way. In update 44, we've nerfed stews quite considerably. We found some calculation problems when we looked at them, which meant that they were grossly overpowered to what they should have been. So that hopefully has been addressed. If you are supporting this question, let us know what you think now. after this video's come out, or since the update was released, if you still see this as a problem, and we'll counterbalance that with the other intended uses we have for the potions, and see if we can address it further.
The other one's to do with desync. A lot of you know we've moved the client to start.
Mark is on.
Mark is on.
Right.
We changed it to lurk on the client side, and we'll eventually, once we have time, we're already really busy, but once we have time, we'll look into doing a bit of that interpolation on the server side, which means what you'll see on your client will reflect the server a little better, and that should improve PvP specifically for smooth locomotion, but we'll also need to look into teleporting stuff. But it's something we're aware of and something we will fix. It's a matter of finding the time at this stage.
There is, so out of that point, it does ask about teleportation and desync. One of the key things I think that PvP players have been talking about with teleportation is the speed at which people can teleport.
Yeah.
Those are numbers that we can somewhat adjust. They're a little bit risky because we sort of have to test against the entire world again. But you might see changes in that front on the shorter term compared to the desync issues.
Yeah.
So we might, if we get a chance, we'll go in and play with numbers and see what we can come out with.
In general, right now, teleporting is overpowered. In general, not just in combat. Like, it's faster than smooth locomotion, and we want teleporting to get around obstacles that you couldn't with smooth locomotion, and we want it there for players that can't play without getting sick with smooth locomotion. But we don't want it to be. Well, what we see currently is if I'm chasing someone, the best way for them to escape is just to spam teleport, because that's faster than running, and that's never what we intended.
Yeah. So we'll see what changes we'll make with that.
What will the forest be like? Is it challenging? Oh, I can tell you it's challenging to do the forest. Can't the same items be found in the mines? Will there be unique items? Can ore/ingots be found?
Yep. So the main goal with the forest, I think, is going to be primarily wood collection, I guess. Like, if you think about it, it's kind of like the woodcutters version of the mines.
I mean, there is wood in the forest.
So part of that means we're going to roll different types of wood, and they will have different set of parameters that will affect your crafting process. Particularly with things like handle making, one thing that we're really interested in doing is the wood having an effect on your bows, in terms of like its performance. Because right now we have one bow, and then the only thing that really seems to matter is your arrows. But there's bows have this complex set of parameters that we could adjust with woods that we haven't really touched.
Accuracy, shot distance.
Yeah, like
drawback distance.
Yeah, the drawback distance. That's pretty much it. And
the other big thing, and it's the same with metals. A lot of people like to do different weapon things, and I imagine once the new crafting system comes out, they'll want to make their lantern out of a different metal or do whatever because it looks different, not because it's stronger. You might want to make your weapon green just because you want to have a green weapon. And same goes with wood. I think different wood types will tie into that a lot.
Yeah.
And same with metals, there'll be different levels of accessibility. So it might look quite glamorous to be able to have a weapon made out of a particular type of wood, even if you don't care about the stat changes associated with it.
Yeah. And obviously it can affect non-crafting related things like the chiseling process will probably be affected by the wood, fuels, that sort of thing. And I'd like to see more, like maybe we'll see more features come out of using wood for different things. But
it would be
like
sweet.
because I know
fuel is another thing.
Yeah. I mean, if we were if we were able to make whiskey in the game, like the wood you use could matter a lot.
In terms of other things in the forest is like it's like the hub of a whole bunch of things. So there'll be bosses, there'll be huge camps. The camps you see in the fields right now will appear in the forest. There'll be there might be caves that you can come across, or ruins, or other creatures, and so the loot that you'll get within the forest isn't just restricted to the natural vegetation and animals there. So there'll be different animals, different plants and trees, obviously, but there'll also be everything that it leads into, and everything that it contains, all sorts of cool things. And that does mean some things like ores will be found in both, and some creatures may be found in both the mines and the forest, but you're not going to if you want ores, you're not generally going to be going, okay, I'm going to head into the forest looking for ores. That's what you'll do in the mines.
Yeah.
But maybe there will be a unique ore in the forest. I don't know. There's a lot to be discussed still in that sort of area.
All right.
Dungeons when?
Dungeons are, so there's a lot of other features, a lot of the other large features that we want to get going before dungeons. Primarily, it is a really like end game sort of thing. We want to be able to create the challenge, sort of the road to that challenge before the dungeon, for that set of content and systems to be in place before we do a dungeon. Primarily because dungeons are going to be a huge task of, procedural generation and making sure that it stays fun. We don't really want to do set dungeons so that, this dungeon's always the same. We want it to be different, and we want it to be different enough this, like the second, third, fourth, 12th time you've done it.
Yeah, it doesn't want to get boring. It'll probably hook into house building, which means you can ask us when dungeons will come again after we release houses, whenever that will be. Until houses are released, dungeons are not going to even get worked on or touched or thought about too much. But I imagine dungeons will hook into maybe the forest or caves or ruins or whatever. But again, it's not something we can work on until we've spent more time doing PvE evaluations. We've done house building, and we've finished. We've got programmers available. That's a big one. Just having manpower to work on things. If you're slightly disappointed by that answer that we're not going to have dungeons for a while, we're hoping that some of the things you want in a dungeon are going to be featured in slowly through those challenge things that Victor and I were talking about earlier, with making the traversing through the overworld environment more of an adventure and with more obstacles. We can see some people have been messing around with the console. There's a lot of features. The specific question is, when will Stinger come out? If you don't know what Stinger is, it's this ability that we worked on for the melee combat tree, where you're able to sort of charge back, and then kind of like the wave slash, you have this orb appear in front of you, and when you pierce through it, or when you sort of attack through it, it dashes you. So it's a pretty classic character action style ability, and that's why it's there in the game. At the time, it didn't fully work. We didn't really balance it completely, so that's why it was never released. As to when it will come out, I'd like to think probably in the next wave of skills that we're gonna try and work on and release at some point. The main reason we're not adding more skills now is because, from a systems perspective, the leveling system is complete. You can level up, you can get experience, level up, spend points. The whole acquisition process of getting skills is done. You can sell those points back. So at that point, it's just us working on content, and that content doesn't necessarily scale out into different systems, and that's why we don't really add more to it at this stage. To answer the bigger question of, I guess, when other features that you can see through the console, or however you've found out about them, will come. Stuff that's in the game but not actually in the game. There's kind of a reason it's there generally. It's something we didn't have time to dedicate to, or we didn't see it as a priority, or it was a feature that we used for testing or still use for testing and isn't actually designed to be publicly available. So you'll definitely see more of those things over time, and we may disable ones that we actually think are, like, there's some which will just break your server, so don't spawn stuff in randomly. But I guess stuff will exist. Generally, they won't have deadlines. It's not like it's work in progress features. Generally, we try and keep that stuff out of the game. But just I think be careful with what you spawn. Ask around whether other people spawned it and had issues. We don't want people breaking their servers and then not being able to play. So,
some of the things are like prototype features that are not balanced at all, so they're kind of overpowered, like the Hoover and stuff like that.
Oh, the vacuum cleaner looking thing. Yeah. Okay. Let's go through bows, ranged weapons getting a bigger update. Maybe after the new crafting.
Maybe after the new crafting.
We might look into it a bit more.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, as Victor and Boramy mentioned, we might look into bows going on quivers and stuff like that, because some of the bag stuff has been is being expanded in that sense.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned, different wood types. Once forest is further along, might tie into different bows, stuff like that.
Yeah. As far as more weaponry, it's again, it is a bit more content type of thing. So it'll probably come after all those things around. But something that is nice is that the new crafting system will allow us to just, that we just have to create the content out. There's not necessarily that deep a system we need to.
You don't have to create every individual part necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Resolve that one.
Yep. Okay. There's a question of boss. Boss will come out when we work on a boss. Probably after the forest as well.
In terms of our ideas for bosses,
or maybe with the forest.
Maybe I don't know.
We'll see.
Ideas for bosses is that we want it to be pretty much a collaborative effort for you to defeat a boss. We kind of like the idea of there being more mechanics to a boss as opposed to it just being a HP grind. So I think that's where it's going to be a fairly production intensive thing. Like, it's not just about us making a huge enemy with these attacks and then he just kind of swipes and he's got 1,000 HP. It's more about being able to create these stages and this process of defeating the boss that's going to be interesting, and kind of utilize VR for
not
that.
Just attacking it in any way, but maybe attacking particular parts and doing various things. And we don't want to have health bars, so we don't want to have here's 1,000,000 health and you can see it go down. So we'll need to brainstorm ways to visually represent that, or give you a good idea of how far through the battle you are.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what they meant by what are your ideas of bosses. I think they literally meant are we releasing a giant Shmichi as a boss? That's the question.
We're gonna keep quiet on what the bosses might be in the game.
Yeah, we've got lots of sketches.
A lot of sketches.
But they're for us, not for you. Okay, climbing. It's a bit up in the air. We'll give you more news on that when we have it.
Yeah, I mean the basics of it. We'd like to keep it as open as possible, but we gotta balance that so that it's not completely broken and doesn't get in the way of the rest of the game. Is the other thing.
So in the current build, obviously, you can only climb on set pieces. In the game, it could be any combination of set pieces, like general assets, or literally everything. But we'll have to find where the balance of that is.
Current order of release for housing Armour dungeons. I mean, we said that housing is coming after. Dungeons is coming after housing. With Armour, it's likely that Armour will come first. I don't know. Probably.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But I think Dungeons and Armour are two things that will be somewhat codependent in a sense. Like, to really go far with Dungeons, we'll want to have different types of armor already. But Dungeons will probably also be a fantastic way to get armor. So that'll be a cool interaction. Let's skip through again. Merchandise and plush toys. We have done a couple prints of T-shirts. They didn't wash very well. Why did I succeed in sitting in the sun? Yeah, they didn't wash very well, so we got to find a different place. Team is in charge of that. If you want merchandise sooner, just PM Teamer saying you want merchandise sooner.
Yeah.
Teamer, Tima. Don't PM Timo. He'll kill me.
Yeah, the main thing is we're just doing quality checks on stuff right now before we really commit to a platform that sells merch.
Yep. And plush toys. I mean, we would love a Shmichi plush, but we've got to look into how to do that. I don't know where to go. If you have any ideas, PM me. I'm keen to hear.
Right. When will? What is the team working on now? I mean, we've sort of covered that. Just in case you skip to this section, just to get the just to get to the Q&A. Joel's doing forest. Me and Victor doing crafting things. Timo's still doing some server-ish things. I don't know what that is. Serena and Gary are doing cosmetic things. That's what's happening.
Will Gary be in the Q&A? No.
No, Gary's not going to be in the Q&A for a bit. He's focused on his internship right now.
I was just answering this one, in case it wasn't obvious. He's not in this Q&A. Will we get zip lines? Zip lines would be wicked. We've talked about zip lines.
I feel like I know who asked that question. Zip like a sort of, I guess, zip lines are relatively easier for us to do actually, because it's kind of it's still fairly client side.
Says the designer, he doesn't have to do any programming.
It's still a fairly client side thing.
Well, look, I've made a straight line, and I've given you a hand.
As long as only one person
now program this.
As long as only one person is on the zip line, it's not so bad. But if stuff like moving platforms with multiple people on it is where things get weird.
Okay, I was wrong about the Q&A. Okay.
So the stuff like moving platforms with multiple people on it is more difficult because of the server client situation.
Yeah.
We don't part of the concern with doing stuff like that is if the server lags, we don't really want to be juddering you as it catches up.
Or having you fall off.
Yeah, or necessarily having you fall off. So it's going to be a bit of trickery there.
Will there be any different types of metals or alloys in the future? Almost definitely. I cannot imagine there not being any more metals.
There will be some, probably quite far from now, because we want to make someone fully decked out with Valiant right now be challenged severely before that ever comes around.
Yeah.
Because when we released the new alloys, people got really, really strong.
Or we might have more variation, so not just straight up damage, not straight up armor or damage, but
we'll probably branch out in parallel directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just we're down to the low vote, so we're just going to skip through, pick some that stand out to us.
When will Magic come out? Not anytime soon.
Probably after half the other things that have been discussed.
Yeah. Quite far away, just because Magic's, it's it's gonna be a finicky system to do, and it's gonna be content heavy. So those are not things that we're willing to tackle. Whilst there's other overall game balance priorities.
How much will private servers cost? Become a supporter and then $0. So right now $10, I guess, to become a supporter, and then enable your private server. In the future, we'll have to see. We haven't settled on anything. The goal is to try and keep them free, but we might have paid tiers at some stage.
Yeah.
At this stage, for the foreseeable future, it's just going to be available for supporters for free, for no extra cost.
Will we see new buildings, possibly an in-game store for clothing?
Will we see new building? We'll see a new crafting building.
Yeah, you'll definitely see new buildings get added as professions and stuff like that get added, or, new crafting mechanics or things like that. We have wanted to make an in-game store for the cosmetics, just so you can try out the stuff before you finish with purchasing them. Maybe that'll be in the game world. Maybe that'll also be out in the metaverse with the main menu.
Or something, yeah.
But we're not doing any work on that yet, so we don't have the time for that.
Right, scroll down. Okay, fishing. When will fishing be? Everything's when will things be implemented? When will fishing be implemented?
And we need to
And
pump
how
out
would you
features
guys
fast.
go about doing something like that? There are actually some really cool
Fishing games.
fishing VR games. Fishing seems to be like the go-to VR
Yeah.
sort of crazy fishing. If you haven't played it, we played that and it had some cool mechanics, some
Yeah.
interesting fish.
It just has like some cool nuance and gave a bit of meaning to what fish you caught because they did stuff.
We'll probably have different types of rods, different types of lures.
Yeah.
I really liked in Stardew Valley how different lakes and water sources have different types of fish.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine that tying into the forest. I head into the forest and there's a particular lake which happens to give me a type of rare fish that is hard to find elsewhere. But I have to remember how to get to that lake or whatever.
Probably have different lines as well and stuff like that, like different string.
Yeah. When will it be implemented? No idea.
Yeah, we actually don't know.
I have no clue. Okay, we pretty much answered the next couple.
Yeah.
Big swing system, account for player height and approximate reach. It's pretty much how far the pickaxe or whatever you're swinging has moved. So if you're taller, you will naturally get bigger swings, so you are somewhat benefited. But
I think it's mostly like handles, like I think tall players using large handles definitely go over the max.
they'll go well. Yeah, that's the thing. They'll go well and truly. There's a point where you've done max damage, and a further swing's not going to improve that. And a tall player might actually find them doing these larger swings is actually more time consuming and thus balances it out or something. It's not really something that we've noticed to be an issue. We've done different tests. As long as you're doing a reasonable overhead swing, whether you're like a tall person doing a big one or a shorter person, it really shouldn't matter that much as long as you're doing a swing and not just waving your hand.
Yeah.
Will there be more crackers in future podcasts? No, not. Well, probably mints.
Yeah, we have hidden brand mints. I don't want to sponsor them.
Yeah.
Oh, pistachios.
No, these aren't pistachios. Those are macadamias.
Oh.
Want some macadamias?
Yeah, I'll have some macadamias.
Oh,
Jesus.
crap.
This is why we have bugs at the office.
There's a lot more macadamias than planned. And macadamias.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're allergic. We didn't mean
To trigger you.
to trigger your allergies.
Maybe in future podcasts there'll be crackers.
Yeah.
Maybe different types next time.
Office tour when? Maybe one day. There's not much to tour.
Yeah, if I literally pull this down, you'll see the whole office that we're in.
Lathes when?
We talked about lathes when we did carpentry at first.
Originally the chisel deck was a lathe, but it didn't make sense to make a
to make anything that's not
anything that's not
like anything that's not just a fancy cylinder.
Yeah. Maybe one day it'd be cool.
Yeah.
But
I can imagine it for furniture making and stuff like that.
like the table legs, especially lathes, make a lot of sense. The staircase rails.
Which one do you want to answer?
Scroll down to the bottom. There's a bunch of ones. Let's read some of the ones.
Oh, you want to read some of the ones?
Yeah.
For all the people who got 0
Oh, I
votes?
saw my name.
These are some good questions.
When will we see more eyeball options?
Eyeball options is a difficult one. We want to keep them pretty subtle. I know people really want cat eyes and stuff like that. They're really
Not going to get them anytime soon.
no. We're trying to kind of stay away from like animal stuff.
Yeah, the reason we put in 2 for now is because we thought it was pretty cool to show off the fact that those sort of things aren't out of the range of possibility. But yeah, we want to keep it fairly. We want to keep it fairly like standard and not super crazy. What does a typical work day look like for us fine folks?
Sometimes we sit down when we work. Sometimes we're standing up.
For the fine folk. So Boramy doesn't. We have a morning meeting every morning.
Every
It's meant to
morning.
go for 5 minutes. Usually goes a bit longer.
Yep.
We call it a daily. We tell each other what we're doing. And then every 2 weeks on Monday. So when we do a release on Wednesday, 2 days earlier on that Monday, we had done a
Sprint meeting.
where we talk about the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the goal is to wrap up everything by Friday on the end of the 2 week, so that it's all done, ready to go, to then ship on Wednesday. So theoretically, everything should be done 4 days.
Yeah, about 4 days.
Before we release it. That's rarely the case, but it's a nice goal to have.
Yeah. Usually we spend Monday and Tuesday fixing bugs for that system, but generally nothing new gets added after that Friday.
Terraria. Do we have a Terraria?
Did we get ideas from Terraria for making this game? Yes.
We like lots
Terraria
of
and
things.
I mean, early when Joel and I started making this game, we were looking at Terraria and Stardew Valley because we really like the type of content they have in the game. Where Terraria really explores everything it can do with its system
And weird, wacky combinations. And
yeah.
one of the things that I think is really cool about Terraria, which is very different to our game right now, and I think we'll try and head in that direction more, like we've always aspired to head in that direction more, is how diverse a kit people end up with. Right now everyone's going towards Valiant swords and stuff. We really want to diversify that more, and we have skills and people have quite diverse skills, but stuff like in Terraria, how you might get a lot of people want to get the grappling hook, but you get the ivy grappling hook or the double grappling hook so that you can suspend yourself in particular ways, and the boots so you can double jump or wings or whatever. Like, people just go crazy with different, and everyone's quite unique. We'll definitely head in that direction, and also bosses is the other thing about Terraria that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like the ways to summon bosses and stuff like that, it's pretty cool. Fighting them, I wish could be a bit more fun, but the game already has so much precision.
Yeah, but the idea that you can summon bosses or have a little bit of control, I think we'll definitely have a balance in our game between summoning and just finding, like turning a corner and crap, there's a huge boss ahead of me or whatever. Fishing keeps going up.
Have we talked about fishing already?
We'll do 2 more.
Yeah, it's coming up to an hour.
You get to pick one, I get to pick one. Pick well.
Okay, I'm gonna take that one. The question is, will we ever get rickshaws or drawn wagons? I would love that. Personally, I think I was discussing it, I think, with some people on the feedback forum about, like the role of NPCs and creatures and stuff with in relation to wagons. Our ideal goal, and this is a far-fetched goal, so disclaimer there, is for that to be completely player-driven. So you have your wagon that you use to store up stuff, and you store up stuff in the wagon because your inventory will be limited. So you put on the wagon to carry more, and then you hook up your horse to it and you drive it around. That's absolutely the idea. Originally, when we're creating art for the game and building up the town, we look at other games, and a lot of the other games have lots of set dressing in it, like stacks of hay and like carriages and wagons and trolleys and stuff like that. We didn't want to put any of those in, because if it's in the game, then you should be able to interact with it, and it should serve its purpose. So that's part of the reason why, if you were around like a year, like at the very start of this, the town was a lot emptier in terms of like the things that are in it. Like now almost every house in the game has a function, and we want to keep growing that out so that the town is this just fully functioning dynamic world.
Okay, so last Altacast, I mentioned puzzles. I was referencing Zelda at the time, because Zelda, especially Breath of the Wild, I haven't played all of them, but especially Breath of the Wild has a lot of attention for its different puzzles right now. And so the question is, Joel brought up the puzzle aspect in the forest/temples. Will we be seeing puzzles like math?
Just straight up math.
Just straight up math. Or finding the hidden switch pressure plate. I think if we do puzzles, we'd be keen to do puzzles, but I think if we do puzzles, they'd probably be a little more embracing the physical nature of Township Tale and VR in general. Stuff like being able to really look around and look behind things and get an idea of like these gears interact with each other in this way, or pulling this rope lifts this up, which lets whatever. I think.
A bit more environmental.
Yeah, but it's definitely not. We probably will never do like a hardcore maths puzzle or anything like that, or extreme logic puzzles. It'll probably be a bit more intuitive, not requiring something you can experiment with and get a solution for, rather than requiring external knowledge.
Yeah.
I think escape rooms are pretty cool things to think about. The idea that in a lot of cases, actually,
I mean, no, a lot of them are like mathematical.
I hate.
And they're like math pattern recognition and stuff like that.
Some of them are pretty good, where it's like slide this along, and you got to try and match up this pattern, or you got to do whatever. I did one where I had to move a magnet with a marble on the other side of the wall, and my brother had to shout through the wall. That was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Anyway,
all right.
But,
yep. Okay, that about wraps up. Do you want to talk about something else?
No, I was just going to say we're going to post a link to the next. We're going to clear this one. If your question wasn't answered and you would like to see it again, feel free to drop it in the new one. But we're going to create a new I said FAQ on this one. We're going to create a new Q&A thing, and then you can drop your question in there, upvote other questions. The link's going to be in the description. Yeah, that means we'll have more questions for next time.
Yep.
Sorry if we didn't answer it, but you know we don't really want to talk for 2 hours straight.
We'll try and keep these down to an hour. I think that's a good time. But yep, all right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks
for
watching.
Playing. Thank you for supporting.
Yep. See you next time.
Bye.